Hey, good morning, everybody. Robert Phoenix. Robert Phoenix, back on the case. Hey, what's happening? Streaming to you live from Hill Country, the 830, as they say. Another beautiful day. Another beautiful day in Hill Country. Let's see. Who do we got? Mary Grether missed yesterday's show, had to get the COVID test. I'm very sorry to hear that. I hope you passed the test. Susie Escobar. Yes, you are the first one. Congratulations. Well, second. All right, Deborah Lynn. Hey, Deborah Lynn, I got your email, and I will reply to you. You will be getting your transit report today. Okay, 10-4. FUP 77. What's happening? Isla Wren in the house. There she is. The wench with a wrench. It's Sheriff Ani Brito. Ani Brito. What's going on, Ani? BB's in the house. Good morning, BB. My man, Steve Mercer. Steve and I have been cooking up some really good guests. We had a great powwow yesterday. It looks like we're going to have Ole Damagard joining us on a Friday Farcast coming up in a couple of weeks. So I'm looking forward to my conversation with Ole Damagard. We got James Bartley. I've been on James's show. Looks like we're going to have him this Friday, and hopefully another scintillating and enlightening guest. I want to thank Steve for all the great help he's brought to the table in that area. Judy Anderson, my girl Judy's here. Carrie Prasad. Hello. Paula Tuttle, Charles Mazak. Life after Google, George Gilder is being promoted nationally. Have you checked it out? No, but it'll be on my list. Cheryl. Here's Cheryl. What's going on, Cheryl? Nice to see you. Frank Bry. Hello, Frank. Frank was the recipient of one of the transit reports yesterday because he signed up. And I'm getting ready to launch a new website. We're getting real close here. And once I get the new website up, then we're going to start doing webinars. So everybody that, signed up and say, okay, Robert, we're going to do these webinars. And the webinars are coming. They're on their way. Okay. So just hang in there, be patient. They're on their way. So just, I'm probably about a week out from the new website, and it's going to be great. I'm going to start writing again. It's been a long time. That's really where I got my start. When I started to do this back in 2000 and about 2008, it was right during the presidential election. Hey, there's my man, Paul. What's going on, Paul? Nice to see you, man. Coach K in the house. Christopher Volkel. Hello, Christopher. Stevie 33. What's going on, Stevie? Happy birthday, Stevie 33. All right. Some people say it's satanic to celebrate your birthday. I don't believe that. Sorry. I don't believe that. Ole Damagard should be good. James, I love James. He's great. I've been on a show. Super, super bright guy. We'll get down into the nuts and bolts here. Things. I was your webmaster once. I don't know about that. Nice to see you, Stephen. Hope you're doing well up there in the North Dallas 40. Let's see. Jimmers 333 also in the house. Good to see Mary Black is here. Laurel Jubin, new router installed. I'm back, baby. Way to go, Laurel. Phoebe Kane. Hi, Phoebe. All right. The forces are assembling. They are assembling. So it was really cool yesterday. We had a great comment from Mr. Cruz over on the permanent comment site over on YouTube. And he basically said that he just wanted to send out a lot of appreciation and love to Chatlandia. And then we had a few other people chime in. Christine chimed in. And, again, I can't express my gratitude and respect enough for the people that come here and watch the show every day, that support the show. A huge part of my life in a way that you can't even really begin to comprehend. And I think it's a mutual admiration society, that we have a lot of reciprocity going on. And again, I know that we're not the only sort of pocket. We're not the only island of, so-called sanity, even though I know most of you are as crazy as loons, because I know I am, right? But that's the beautiful part of it. We can bond together in our kind of crazed view of the world, and somehow it all coheres and it makes a lot of sense, right? So we're holding the molecular structure together every day here, right around 8:45. And we're not alone, right? There are other groups and other pods and other kind of online cultures that are out there that are doing the similar things or having the same connections or unspooling reality in very similar ways. And that's really a good thing. And it's not what's being broadcast, right? Gil Scott-Heron, whose music I really, really dug. I thought Gil Scott-Heron was a genius and probably did not get as much respect and due as he should have as an artist. Of course, his most famous song was "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." Well, Gil Scott-Heron was wrong because the revolution is and was televised and will continue to be televised. And I'm going to talk about that today. And I'm going to talk about this word. It's called a simulacra, right? A simulacra is a thing that stands in for another thing. And here we're getting into Gemini. I'm going to go down some rabbit holes today. We're going to expose some stuff. We're going to look at sort of the driving forces behind the cultural and social revolution. Who they are may surprise you a great deal. We're also going to look at what happened yesterday. There was major phone outages yesterday with T-Mobile and a few other carriers. I did not experience them here, but other people have. Other people did. You want to pay attention to that, right? That's a test they're running. And at some point, the communication grid is going to go. This is going to be the next thing. I think this is the next thing, is that the communication grid will probably go down. And that we may not be able to get online. We may not be able to use our cell phones. That's a time where you've got to be really, really on your toes. Really on your toes. And this is why it's important to know people around you, so that if the shit does hit the fan and we do go literally dark on the communication side, there could be an issue also with the power grid, not just the communication grid. Now, could you imagine that if the power grid goes down? Think of New York when they had the blackout. What was that? 1977, I think? 1977 when they had the blackout? Yeah, that was scary shit, man. That was really, really, but that was the birth of hip hop, by the way. A lot of people don't understand that. Then when they had the blackout in New York City, what happened was they went in, and they, being, of course, the protesters, they went in and they started stealing all this audio equipment. And the audio equipment they were stealing were turntables and amplifiers and speakers. And then that audio equipment started to show up a few months later, and guys were doing, hip hop battles in the street. And I think the first guy that really kind of brought it all together was this guy named DJ Herc, who was Jamaican. And he was known for kind of doing the whole, hip hop scratch thing, coming out of sort of the Jamaica, because in Jamaica they would do stuff like this, right? A little bit. They had a little bit with LPs and 45s, but this guy took it to another level. And then all of a sudden now you've got crews in New York City, the B-boy crews and stuff like that. And they're actually using a lot of the equipment that they stole during the blackout in New York City. So in a lot of ways, that blackout helped birth hip hop, or rap as we know it. Little known fact: you can watch documentaries on the blackout in New York City and make your toes curl. What they did to local owned businesses was, it's like what they did to local owned businesses in this latest escapade, this latest riot. And the hard part was that I'm watching there was a store in these, and it was a sporting goods store, and it was this older couple who had a sporting goods store, and they had their store completely looted. It was really bad, and the looks on their faces were like, we served this community for years, and I know that they probably would give stuff to people on a layaway or whatever, right? And it was just gone. They were gone. It was done. You should have seen the looks in their faces, the devastation, and not unlike some of the looks of other people that we've seen. We are now in a cultural revolution. This is not a class war. It is a class war that has been disguised as a race war. Remember that now. It's a class war that has been disguised as a race war. This is the simulacra, And I'm going to get into some of the programming around this. And there are some very interesting parallels to Nazi Germany. And I think what we're seeing, so I was thinking, what was it like to be a part of Nazi Germany? Right? What was it like to be a part of Nazi Germany? To be engaged in, and I know that there are people who have different opinions and views on Nazi Germany, right? There are some people that said that, that they were going after the bankers and they had the right idea and all that stuff, right? And there are other people that say, well, Hitler, comes from a family called Schicklgruber. Actually, just by the way, a lot of people don't know this, and this is a fact, that Hitler knew Karl Marx, and that Karl Marx, I think, actually stayed in Hitler's grandmother's place as a boarder. A lot of people don't know this. So Marx and Hitler actually knew each other. Wrap your head around that for a minute, okay? But let's just say, for the sake of argument now, that there is a public feeling or a mass kind of hysteria, or a group compulsion, as it were. And we could see this, like, say, at the rise at the beginning of the Third Reich. And all of a sudden, people just fall in, right? Because they know that this is the momentum. Momentum is going to be a word that's going to come up today. So keep your head wrapped around that. 9/11. It's 9/11 here. Keep your head wrapped around that. Momentum is a significant word. And so what people will do is that they will respond to energy, and they will respond to the dynamics of momentum and change, almost like being swept along in a current, right? This is what happens. This is exactly what happens. So we're witnessing a lot of that today, and I'm assuming now that a great deal of this happened also in Nazi Germany. Now, what's really interesting about Hitler, again, a little known fact, is that there was a guy by the name of, what was his name? Hold on a second. I just got to get this right. Honus. I didn't have to look it up. I just had to kind of refresh my memory. I think his name is Erich Jan Honus. Okay, Hannusan. Now, there's a very interesting movie by the same title, and the character Honus is played by Klaus Maria Brandauer. I highly recommend this movie, by the way. It's a really, really important movie, because you can see they don't really portray him in the light that maybe Honus actually was as a character. Honus was an occultist. He was a master magician, and he was a master hypnotist. And apparently, he's the guy that taught Hitler how to manipulate crowds, right? He was the guy that told Hitler how to put crowds in a spell. And then Honus eventually just kind of disappears. He disappears. There's an interesting movie from the 1950s. I got to figure it out. I've got to remember the name. It's kind of lightly based on the Honus character, and it's a circus that's traveling, and they pick up a German hypnotist who hypnotizes certain people inside the circus, and he's a complete and utter psychopath. It's a pretty interesting movie. I'll try to remember it, but if you can actually see Honus, the movie Honus, with Klaus Maria Brandauer, it's a very interesting. Now, the way that it's portrayed in the movie, of course, is that Honus is forced, right? There's two movies that Klaus Maria Brandauer was in, and one was called Mephisto, the other's called Honus, and in both instances, he portrays somebody who's instrumental in the formation of the Third Reich. Mephisto is about an actor, okay, an actor who's coerced into doing pro-fascist theater and pro-fascist films, okay, and then in Honus, he's coerced in order to use his talents to give Hitler these special powers of neurolinguistic programming and hypnotism. He's forced, right? Well, it's probably more like in real life, that Honus wasn't forced. He was actually very much invested in what he could do with Hitler. And in fact, in some ways, feels like a handler. Okay. He feels like a handler. Now, just to make the record clear and straight, Jan Erich Honus was also Jewish. Okay. I'm just being straight up here. I'm not trying to cast any weird aspersions. This is a historical fact. Okay. So Hitler was working with a Jewish mesmerist. Now, wrap your head around that for a minute. Wrap your head around that for a minute. Just hold that thought there just for a moment while I do the invocation. Here we go. All right, dear blessed and holy Father, Mother God of the great central sun with the universal light, which is the light of Sananda, Yeshua, Emmanuel, we ask that only the highest and best information come through this stream at this time. And that in this time we are blessed and graced with courage and faith, compassion, wisdom, strength, flexibility, patience, perseverance, endurance, and above all, heart. We ask all of these things so that we may be in this time and grow through this time, which is an incredibly important time in the historical cycle of this planet. Now, any karmic residue that we have or share together, let it be clarified, cleansed, purified, and removed so that we can rejoin our lives or re-enter our lives in a sovereign place and in a sovereign space. And that goes for everybody in Chatlandia or watching this video after the fact. So be it, let it be done. Okay, so wrap your head around that now. Wrap your head around that Hitler was trained in the art of mesmerism by an occultist, and the occult was a very big part of the Third Reich, the Thule Society and all that stuff. They were very into like accessing magical powers. I mean, who wouldn't be on some level, right? Who wouldn't be? It's because like, hey, this shit's not really working really well out here. I mean, that's actually kind of the genesis of Crowley, by the way. Crowley was a complete like rebel and stuff. He was in the English school system. And again, what happens is he sees all this cruelty and, he's whipped and beaten and he's like, screw this, man. If this is the power of this world, then I've got to fight against it. Now, again, I'm not advocating Crowley or Thelema, or, I'm not. I'm just telling you, this is where the mindset goes, okay? Because they see what happens in this world and they say, okay, well, I've got to go find an answer to this stuff. I have to find a more direct source and access to power so I can theoretically, flip the script or change or whatever, okay? So I'm not endorsing him. I'm just telling you that that's how he gets his start. That's how he gets turned on to the occult. He gets turned on to the occult because he sees what's happening and what's happened to him. And he understands that it's quote unquote not fair. And believe it or not, Crowley was a Libra. So fairness, I think, probably mattered to him on some level. Very interesting short story with Ernest Hemingway writing about Crowley in Paris. They knew each other. All right. So we got that. So where else do we see mesmerism? We see mesmerism appear in cults. It appears in cults. Occult is very similar, right? They're linked together. And when you see somebody like Jim Jones, Jim Jones, a CIA asset, probably again trained in the arts of mesmerism, could get people entrained, right? Entrained. And by the way, Jim Jones was loved by Democrats in California. They loved him. They loved the People's Temple. They loved the People's Church. They donated all kinds of money. Jim Jones was kind of like, and the Al Sharpton of the Bay Area, only he was actually like Al Sharpton was, I think he was ordained as a minister at like 9 years old or something, but he's not really a practicing minister. It's only when it suits him. But that's where Jones came from. Of course, he had his programming and all the other stuff that went along with him. But again, there's this mesmeric kind of ability to hypnotize people, right? And what we're going through now is a complete occult ritual and a mesmeric trance. And what we're seeing, by the way, in some ways is very similar to what happened during the Third Reich. And we are now seeing the rise of a new fascism. And it's really fascinating, right? Because we see this all the time with the so-called left. They will always cast aspersion upon the right, or always cast aspersion upon the other side and say, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're hateful, you're bigoted, all these things, right? And it's all just a massive form of collective projection. Massive. You want to know what like, if when somebody's really fronting and they have a significant issue, they will keep running that issue and they will point that finger outwards to the world. Okay, that's what happens. That's how it happens. And people do it in their personal lives as well. It's not just a collective kind of set of rules. Individuals do it all the time, and it's like you can watch them. If they keep bringing something up, or a certain person up, or a certain type of person up, and they say, well, they're the problem, they're the problem, they're the problem. Sometimes there are people or groups that are, let's just say it, right? They can be problematic. Are they the problem? Likely not. They are symbolic of a deeper problem, right? But this is what happens with the left. They do this all the time. They use this psychology of projection. And then once they're in that, there's nothing you can say to them. Nothing. You cannot talk to them. You cannot reason with them. You cannot provide them with facts. They'll just shut you down. They've already got their prescribed talking points of truth. This is how it works. So what we're seeing now is very similar to what happened in Germany after the Reichstag, right? There's this fire. The Reichstag is set ablaze, and it is set ablaze by Hitler's brown shirts. Keep that in mind now. There is an actual identity for people who begin to take on the ideology of the Third Reich. Okay, so we have these brown shirts. They set fire to the Reichstag, and that trips everything. So when we look at the George Floyd event, what we're seeing is a modern day version of the Reichstag. 9/11 started it. 9/11 was really the Reichstag of the 21st century. Okay, and we've had many Reichstags all along the way. And what we saw after the George Floyd event is the equivalent of the Kristallnacht, right? Or the Crystal Night. And that's when they went out and started essentially burning shops and, quote unquote, killing the Jews in Germany, right? Merchant class. That's exactly what we saw in the days after the George Floyd event, right? They went out and they burned the shops, they burned they looted and burned both private, small business, and corporate shops, corporate stores. Very much similar to the Kristallnacht experience, right? So we're seeing a pattern here, which very much resembles the rise of the Third Reich in Nazi Germany. And then the talking points for a very long time have been severely loaded, right? I mean, if you go back and you look at not just Twitter, but also CNN and all their talking heads, and then you drill down into programming. I'll give you a good example. Jordan Peele's latest offering on Netflix is about Nazi hunters. Okay, it's about Nazi hunters, and Al Pacino plays this guy who assembles a very diverse group of Nazi hunters. This comes out of the revenge porn sort of genre that Quentin Tarantino popularized in a number of films, Inglourious Bastards being one of them, The Hateful Eight, and also Django Unleashed. This is when Tarantino makes a pivot, right? He makes this pivot and says, we're going to go after, you can see that in other parts of his cinema, right? There's certain scenes that will come up. You say, oh, interesting. And by the way, Quentin Tarantino was funded primarily by Miramax, which are the Weinstein brothers. Right? So the Weinsteins and Quentin Tarantino, right there, they're like buddy, hand in glove. Just keep that in mind. All right. So we see this series on Netflix, which has been fueling. It's like they've been priming the psychological pump for what's happening now, which is really a form of mind control and programming. That's what it is. We're witnessing mass mind control and programming, and you can see this on, like, whether it's the Soviet style Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, or what happened in Nazi Germany, right? And even in a lot of ways, what happened here in this country with World War II and World War I, and there was a mass indoctrination or mass induction of programming that we had to go over there and fight those wars. It was your duty. We had to go defend Lady Liberty and all this stuff, right? That in as much of itself was a high level of programming. And of course, we were basically coerced and duped into, almost all of those wars. I've gone through this before with the sinking of the Lusitania, of course, what happened in Pearl Harbor, that they knew that the attack was, and that was one of those moments as a kid, by the way, when I saw that movie, Tora, Tora, Tora. When I saw Tora, 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 I was like, okay, this is interesting, right? The fight scenes are interesting, because I was kind of into war movies as a kid. But then that scene where those guys got the transmission and the code, and they sent it to Washington, and Washington didn't do anything, that scene left a really big impression on me. A really big impression. Like, why did they do that? And then, of course, now all of a sudden, I don't know when that movie came out. It was 1970, 71. So my 10, 11-year-old head starts wrapping itself around a conspiracy. I'm like, man, if that's the case, then you can't trust these fuckers. Like, they will sell you out, right? They will sell you out. So anyway, so we were coerced into those wars. That's programming too. Like, the whole patriot thing is also massive programming. Now, would it be better to be a quote unquote patriot and defend your property and your land and your family and all that stuff? Absolutely, hands down. I will stand up for that 365, right? But the other programming of the patriot, the simulacra of being a patriot, which we've talked about as it relates to the Gulf War, post-Gulf War, you're either with us or against us, the playing of the national anthem at all the sporting events, jets flying over. I hated that shit. I call it fakeriotism. Fakeriotism. Because they were just playing on people's emotions. They were playing on people's emotions and people's trauma. It's like, you go get them, George. You go get them, right? Go get them. We're with you. We're with you. It was the biggest con job. Well, second, we're in another big con job now. It's another 9/11. And who was involved in 9/11? We had intelligence agencies involved in 9/11. The FBI knew. Sybil Edmonds knew, right? You don't think these guys knew? CIA knew. They knew who was involved. And by the way, who was involved is I wouldn't say lateral, but it is a multi-agency and multinational operation. It wasn't just one group, okay? And you guys have gone down the rabbit hole. You can do the math. You know who the players are. You know who the players are. And one of the groups of the players went basically out of the country. They were dancing around. And Trump talked about the dancing Saudis, which was really weird, right? They weren't dancing Saudis. They pulled those guys in. They pulled them over. Apparently, they had some heavy stuff in their moving trucks, right? And they were held in New Jersey for about 30 days, and then they were let go. To me, that's really reminiscent of what happened with Lev Bronstein, also known as Leon Trotsky. Same deal. He was pulled over in Canada on his way to Europe and Soviet Union with a shit ton of money to run the revolution. And they contacted the United States. He was on a boat. The United States said, let him go. Right? Same deal, right? We see this over and over again. We see this play out over and over again. So we're talking about mind control, and mind control can go in any direction. They could mind control you into being a patriot, right? They can mind control you to being a radical terrorist and a socialist. They can mind control you to stand up for the earth and die for the earth. I mean, these are really heavy programs, and now they're socialized, and they're using social media and internet tools in order to drive this home and to really rewire people's brains. People's brains are so rewired now that in most cases, they cannot and will not ever be able to see the truth. Although I do want to give you a very, very encouraging story here. I'm going to pass this on. because it is a glimmer of hope. All right. Little glimmer of hope. I had a client, known her for years, great person. She reached out to me. I did a reading with her on Saturday. She's down in Belize, right? And she was having a conversation with this young gal at a bar in Belize. All right, this is how she characterized the young gal to me. She was mixed race. Her mother was from, I believe, Scottish, and had been raped, okay? Had been raped. So she was obviously raped by a quote unquote Anglo, or, a non-Scot, because she was of mixed race and she was the daughter, right? So she's sitting down at this bar and she's going off. She's going off on, BLM and what's going on in the United States and, all the rhetoric. And my friend was like, basically saying, hey, it's all good, child. So then she tried to involve some of the local Belize girls in her argument or in her diatribe. They weren't taking the bait. They weren't biting. And apparently her boyfriend was Jamaican and he wasn't even buying it, right? So now she's trying to coerce, right? So this is somebody who theoretically has been mind controlled, has the program in her head and wants to now download it to other people. This is the world we're living in now, right? So after she's met with 4 levels of resistance, my friend pulls up the video of that guy MAGA, who was talking about the whole George Floyd thing, the Jamaican guy that I've played before. She plays her that video, and all of a sudden there was like a crack in her world. She saw something different. She began to get quiet. She began to kind of rethink things, right? Which was very interesting. Very, very interesting. And it might have actually shifted or changed her world. Just remember that. Just remember that. Every now and then, somebody can get the right piece of information at the right time, and it could help them make a pivot. It's very important. Now, in order for that to happen, what if any one of those people in that situation was in agreement with her? Now, she would have had somebody on her side to buttress her argument, support her point of view, and keep that programming or that operating system running. But that did not happen, right? That's an important piece. Like, there was a stand down moment, and there were 3 of them, 1 of her, 4 of them, and 1 of her. So in that stand down moment, she comes back and shows her something else, and who knows? Maybe the script was flipped. It's important to understand, though. It's important to understand because there are people that do want the truth at times. They may not even realize it. And in fact, a lot of these people who are theoretically protesting, they want to get to some level of equality and freedom and truth. I get that. But they're getting the simulation. They're getting the simulation, not getting the real revolution, right? They're getting the simulation, and this is the revolution that their quote unquote masters want them to participate in. Same thing happened with the French Revolution. Jacobin Revolution was the same thing. That revolution was masterminded by the elites. That had nothing to do with the people. They cast Lafayette out of France because they knew that Lafayette would have stood up. Even though Lafayette was a Mason, Lafayette was an interesting character. He was buddies with Washington. He said, "Hey, listen, man, you got to deal with this slavery thing. You got to change that." So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was also the governor of Guyana. If I'm not mistaken, you can look that up. So he said, Guyana, you don't have any more slaves anymore. That thing is over with, right? But Washington, and again, if you're following that script and that narrative, right? If you're following that script and that narrative, Washington did a deal. And he did a deal with the so-called slave traders who were based out of Rhode Island, right? Newport, Rhode Island. And these are guys that were kicked out of New York. Peter Stuyvesant kicked them out. And the lead, quote unquote, slave trader was a guy by the name of Aaron Lopez. Okay. Aaron Lopez was a, how do you call it? A Marrano. He was a Marrano Jew, Jewish Marrano, who had left Spain because they were basically saying, look, are you going to be Catholic or not? All right, you got to be Catholic or not. If you're not Catholic, chop it to head, right? That was happening. and so he became what's called a converso. He converted theoretically to Catholicism, but it was just, it was just superficial. So these guys, Peter Stuyvesant says, you got to go. You got to go. So they go to Rhode Island, and that's where they have these clipper ships. Again, if you're following this timeline and this narrative, that's how it unfolds. So Washington went to them and basically wanted money. He wanted money for the revolution. He knew that these guys had money. He did a deal with them, and he said, "Look, when this thing is over, you can do whatever you want, right? You can be, you can be Jewish, you can be a slave trader. We're going to stay out of the way." And that's exactly what he did, right? This is the deal that he made. So if people really, really, really want to drill down into the nuts and bolts of the slave trade, you may want to look at that specific area, right? Rhode Island, Newport, and then the group of people that were kicked out by Peter Stuyvesant, led by Aaron Lopez, also known as a converso. Washington made a deal. It's probably a bad deal, right? If you follow that narrative and that timeline. And I think there could be other narratives and other timelines, but we'll just follow that one for now. So Lafayette said, look, you got to deal with this stuff, but he couldn't because he had made a deal with these other characters. And those other characters, theoretically ramped up what they were doing, vis-a-vis that timeline. So anyway, Lafayette goes back to France, and he gets into deep shit in France, and they have to kick him out because they're gonna run the Jacobin Revolution. And the Jacobin Revolution was essentially put together by the Rothschilds, right? The Rothschilds and the ruling elite, the high ruling elite, black nobility. What they wanted to do during that time is they wanted to eliminate the competition. That's what happened with the French Revolution. All the beheadings and all the people were saying liberté, 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 right? And you had Robespierre and all that stuff. It was about eliminating the competition. That's all it was. They eliminated the competition. That it was basically a purge. The Jacobin Revolution was a purge. So we're seeing a lot of that again today. Of course, the masses get riled up. They think that they're involved in some kind of, truly revolutionary act, when in actuality they're being manipulated like crazy. So we're seeing that now. The same thing is happening, right? So Hitler had the brown shirts. Now I want to show you the equivalent of the brown shirts. Okay, let me show you this. This is the equivalent of the brown shirts. We have black shirts. This is the new color, right? This is the new color and the new uniform of boots on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to stare right into the eyes of new fascism. There it is. Did you ever think that fascism would look like this? Did you ever think, and ironically, they think they're actually fighting against fascism, which is like a total mind blower. But based on the talking points of Black Lives Matter, like if you watched Tucker Carlson last night, you cannot criticize this group. If you criticize this group, you will lose your job and more. You cannot criticize. It's like one of the rules of Fight Club. So they have essentially hijacked the narrative. They've hijacked the narrative, and they're controlling the narrative through their fake revolution, their simulacra revolution. Why are they doing this now? Because the American people were finally starting to wake up. We're finally starting to wake up, and the coronavirus experience, by the way, these are teachers in Seattle. Stare into the face of fascism. There it is. There it is. Isn't that interesting? I think it's mind-blowing. These are the new brown shirts. These are the people that control the debate. They control the debate right now. They control the narrative, right? Because it's sacrosanct. It is cut and dry. It is black and white, okay? If you have a contrary point of view or have a contrary opinion, there are at least 5 talking points, basically social Marxist talking points that will shoot your narrative down. And ultimately, your voice doesn't count. Your voice doesn't matter. And what you represent is systemic. It is systemic, okay? Now, keep in mind that right now, they're drilling down on quote unquote whites, quote unquote Christians, quote unquote males. If they are successful in eliminating this group, what do you think is next? Who do you think they'll go after next? Oh, well, gee, I think there's a lot of systemic racism in the Latino culture. They've got really strong families. Black Lives Matter has already said that their goal is to destroy the American nuclear family. Well, do you think the nuclear family is the province solely of America? Do you think so? Some of the strongest families I've ever been around are from Mexico or Central America, or these are strong families, okay? So who do you think would be next on their hit parade? Question mark. You think they'll stop there? No. Like, who else has money? What about Asian privilege? Oh, that's down the line, but that'll be coming. That'll be coming, right? They got to get the whale first. They're going after the whale. When I say they, it's not just Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is a front. It's a front. It's a social Marxist front. And I don't mind saying that. It's also backed by the intelligence agencies, right? The alphabet groups. This is who they are. This is what they are. And we're seeing like all the corporations go all in, because that's what corporations do, especially now. If you want to flip the script and move away from governments, corporations, NGOs, foundations, collectivism is the new name of the game. Corporations become collective. They move online, right? When you move online, you're moving into a collective space. It's a collective space. If you go to a store and you shop at a store, that's a personal experience. Like, you are looking in the eye of somebody else, right? You look in their eyes and you say, thank you, hello, how are you? Right? That is not a collective experience. When you go online, you're in the realm of the collective. So online shopping, Amazon, Walmart, that is the collective retail experience that they're promoting, not the other. Okay, so there's a lot more to cover here. I don't have a lot of time today. So let me give you a look behind the scenes. I'm going to give you a look behind the scenes of lower level programming that is taking place. And this programming is pervasive, by the way. It's super pervasive. And we talked a little bit about the Sunshine, right? The Sunshine Group, or Project Sunrise Project. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a look into the Sunrise Project. So here we go. Give me 1 second here. Okay, so the Sunrise Project is trained by a group called Momentum. I want to show you sort of the team Momentum page here. Okay, so this is Momentum. Now they have, and you could go down into the bottom here. Well, on their homepage, they'll show you everybody that they work with. So there are all these like nonprofits, NGOs that are in the business of radicalization and programming. So let's just look at their team. This is Momentum. I'm going to show you this is second generation Momentum. So we have Nicole Carty. She's a lead trainer, core team member, a director at Power Labs, formerly campaign manager at Some of Us. These are all subgroups, sub-organizations, sub-movements, probably all funded by the Soros collective of various foundations, NGOs, etc. Nicole was programming director at the other 98%. So look at this. We've already got Power Labs, Some of Us, the other 98%. At least 3 groups that she's been in touch with, learning, networking. Okay. We got Maria Fernanda Cabello. She lives here in Texas. She is organizing work in the campaigns for DACA and DAPA, expanding the rights of undocumented immigrants. Also directed the I'm a Dream Voter project, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. She was a volunteer organizer with COSECA, a new nonviolent popular movement aimed at winning permanent protection, dignity, respect for all immigrants. Okay. So she has, so here we have the so-called Black American ambassador. Now we have the Latino American, or just Latino ambassador. And then we have Alexandra Flores Quilty, the trainer core team member, Momentum. Right? Alexandria is a former U.S. Student Association president, old largest National Student Association, blah, blah, blah. She organized the first Million Student March in 2015. Then she was involved in the movement for free higher education in the U.S., originally from Oregon. She got her start in organizing as a member of the Oregon Students of Color Coalition, blah, blah, blah. Based in Brooklyn. She loves gin puzzles and Selena. So what we're witnessing here is like the bourgeois, right? These are bourgeois people that are leading the proletariat revolution. She lives in Brooklyn, loves gin puzzles and Selena. Sounds like a real revolutionary to me. Now we've got Davida Ginsburg. She lives in Boston. She's got her own bona fides, right? She years experiencing organizing women, experiencing homelessness in Boston Women's Shelter. Now she's also a leader in the Boston Jewish community. Okay, so now we've got representatives. Right? Do you see how the representation now is being spread across a number of different communities, right? Development chair, board president of Moishi Kavod House, and currently is a leader with If Not Now. She spends her time dreaming about alternative economies, come up with creative ideas for making Triller music videos. I have no idea what that means. Now here comes the Christian. Cecilia Lee. Cecilia Lee is the co-training director of Momentum. Before Momentum, Cecilia was also a member of a team organizing young Christians. So now but man, you get a twofer with her, right? She's Asian and she's a Christian, all right? As a designer, currently finding ways to integrate design process with movement building work. Previously, Cecilia worked for Massachusetts Communities Action Network, blah, 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 more networks. Now we have Thais Marquez, and she comes from Credo, was connected to this Movimiento Cosecha. This is all about sanctuary cities, sanctuary campuses. She mobilized 150 campuses to walk out following the election of Trump. Now here we go. Miski Noor, she's into the trans, so she's also mixed race, not mixed race. She's so-called Black American, and now we're bringing in Black Lives Matter, but I believe she is also queer, like Black queer. So now we have the LGBTQ faction, and she also happens to be so-called Black African American, right? She's a queer immigrant, so she's not from this country. She's international. Now we have the international group. Now here we have the one guy that's connected to all this, Akinola. He's a Nigerian. He's a digital resource mobilizer. Now these people get paid. They get paid. He's a dual citizen in Nigeria and the United States. I wonder who else is. Now we have Adiel Polydor. Now that's not her real name, obviously. She's poly, meaning that she goes any which way. She works with Black and Latina youth and youth criminalization and win full youth employment in Massachusetts. She's passionate about education. She's a spiritual vegan and queer. Right now she lives in intergenerational cooperative housing, Dorchester, enjoys storytelling, drinking bubble tea, and going on adventures with friends. This is meet the face of the new revolutionary. It's the simulacra of the revolution. Now we have Lissy Romanow. Here we go. Here's Lissy Romanow. And she comes from another group, right? Again, Massachusetts based. If Not Now shows up a lot with these people. Also connected to the INE Institute. Okay, now these are the people. This group is the group that basically mentored the Sunrise Project. Now, this is the second generation of Momentum. Okay, I'll show you the first generation of Momentum. Paul Engler, Max Berger. These are very, very important people. Remember their names. These are super important people. All right, we're going to get into them a little bit. So they're the first generation. I'll show you. This is the team at Momentum. This is going on. You know, these are basically subversive groups that have a clear agenda, man. They have, and this is just one. Okay, there's a lot of these groups, like massive. These are massive groups. There's a massive network of these groups. So there they are, looking very, very serious. Movement building requires innovative models of organizing. Momentum. They got training and all kinds of stuff. You see these pictures of these graphics when you go into the Sunrise Project and some of the training modules and manuals of the Sunrise Project, same stuff. And these are the people that Momentum does trainings with. Black Lives Matter, 350, Dream Defenders, Ignite NC, Resource Generation. There's the Sunrise Movement. They're all connected. There's Kosecha Movement Net Lab, If Not Now, Citizen Well, Power Shift, Uprooted and Rise. These are all groups. These are all well-funded groups, by the way. All right, so I want to go into want to get into the sort of the oh, so this is, by the way, this is Varshini Prakash. She is one of the heads of Sunrise, right? I think she's pretty clear about like her spiritual standing, her spiritual motivation there. I think it's pretty clear. Pretty clear. All right, let's look at If Not Now. This is another one of these community. So this is a story on Max Berger of If Not Now. And this comes out of the time of Israel. There seems to be a schism now between like sort of conservative, Zionistic Israel/Jewish culture, and then the left, which seems to be more Likudnik and really invested in taking away Israel's power, or like BDS, all those movements. They come out of like a lot of the Sunrise stuff and Momentum and If Not Now. So Max Berger's getting dissed here, right, by the Times of Israel. Days after Israeli troops invaded Gaza in 2014, a group of leftist millennial Jews gathered to plan a public protest of the military operation. The new group, which called itself If Not Now, discussed a public demonstration in front of the conference, a presence of major American Jewish organizations, an establishment Jewish umbrella group. Max Berger was one of the planners who urged them to take a step further. The protesters get arrested at the president's conference, and they should recite Kaddish, the traditional Jewish mourner's prayer. So, Max Berger is essentially not Likudniks. Likudniks on the right. Now, these are Bolsheviks. These are leftist Bolsheviks, okay? So Berger is a leftist Bolshevik, and then If Not Now. So he went from Occupy Wall Street, which was training, by the way. Occupy Wall Street is all training. If not Occupy Wall Street to If Not Now to Justice Democrats, the outfit that supported Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. He became a very important person inside Elizabeth Warren's campaign and moved her to the far left. So when you hear Elizabeth Warren yammering on and on about, getting a young trans teen to pick the new Supreme Court justice or the new whatever, right? That was Max Berger. That's Max Berger. So he's a disruptor, and he shows up in a number of these groups, right? So If Not Now, that's one of his babies. Let me show you another group. This is an important one. What is this? Okay. So this is an uprising, another group, right? This is run by the Engler brothers, Mark and Paul Engler. And these guys, all right, so Paul Engler was one of the founders of Momentum. So what these guys do is they will incubate. This is just like the .com model. They will come in, they will incubate, they will create something, they'll get funding, and then they'll move on to another group. What's really interesting is I think the guy who is also working with Sunrise was the guy by the name of, could be wrong, I thought it was Eric Berger, who had this whole connection with asymmetrical warfare, was a consultant to various military groups. Right, so we have Mark Engler and Paul Engler, and he is the director for the Center of the Working Poor based in LA. It's just the same kind of bona fides, right? Immigrant rights, global justice, labor movements. They're commies. So what they have here is this is a really interesting article, and it makes a lot of sense based on what we've seen in the aftermath of coronavirus. Coronavirus is a historic trigger event, and it needs a movement to respond, and that's exactly what we've seen. That's exactly what we've seen. So these guys are into chaos, and I'm gonna read it to you right here. So this is right out of the mouth of Paul Engler. And by the way, these are all disciples of Gene Sharp, who is the architect and the magician of nonviolent regime change. We'll do a show on Gene Sharp coming up. There are times in history when sudden events, natural disasters, economic collapses, pandemics, wars, famines change everything. They change politics. They change economics. They change public opinion in drastic ways. Many social movement analysts call these trigger events. During a trigger event, Things that were previously unimaginable quickly become reality. That's exactly what we've seen as the social and political map is remade. On the other hand, major triggers are rare, but on the other, we have seen them regularly in recent decades. Events such as 9/11, the Iraq War, Hurricane Katrina, the financial crisis 2008 have all had major repercussions on national life, leading to political changes that would have been difficult to predict beforehand. COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic, is by far the biggest trigger event of our generation. It is a combination of natural disaster, economic collapse happening at the same time. Topping it off, this public health crisis is coming right in the middle of one of the most consequential political seasons of our lifetime. There's no coincidence, right? It happens. These things happen. They're staged. Trigger events can create confusion and unease, but they also represent tremendous opportunities for people who have a plan and know how to use the moment to push forward their agendas. These agendas can be reactionary, as when conservatives and fascists pass harsh austerity measures and spread xenophobia. The type of activity documented in Naomi Klein's shock doctrine. Yes, this type of response need not prevail. With a counter agenda rooted in a commitment to democracy and a deep sense of collective empathy, communities can flourish even amid a crisis. So this is really interesting. I'm going to scroll down. All right, so this is where he says, in my writing on social movements, I have argued that triggers create liminal spaces that mass protest movements can use to mobilize the forces of grassroots democracy. In the wake of such an event, organizers often find themselves in a moment of the whirlwind. Okay, you see that? A moment of the whirlwind in which the standard rules of how politics works are turned on their head. Many of the great social movements of the past have been born out of these moments. But these moments require skillful navigation and the ability to use prophetic promotion to spread a humane vision and the faith that mass mobilization can open new avenues to change that at the outset seem distant and improbable. Okay, so social movements are the vehicle for mass participation. So what we're seeing here now, which is a really, really important factor, right? Let me go back to Yard Barker. Let me get back over here. What we're seeing here is, let me do a stop share on this, is we're seeing the roots of all this stuff, right? We're seeing the roots, we're seeing the networks, we're seeing the tendrils of everything that's been put in place. And the Sunrise Movement has been working assiduously using the trauma event, the moment of the whirlwind, which was Parkland, to flip and turn a whole generation of young girls in school. And by the way, look at the leadership inside of Momentum. They're all women, except for the one dude, right? They're all women. And this goes back to what I was talking about last week, which is we're not just dealing with a race war or a class war, right? We're dealing in a lot of ways with also a gender war. Now, I don't know if you saw this or not, but two things happened yesterday that were of unique significance. Now there's trans Black Lives Matter. Okay. That's going to be an interesting one because I know that there are a lot of brothers out there who are really not down with the trans thing. I mean, let's just be honest. Let's just be upfront, right? They're like, yeah, Black. Now they got to wrap their head around trans Black Lives Matter. Let's see where that takes them, how that splits the schism in their brain. I'm just being honest, right? Because I know there are some brothers out there that are down. They're down with the movement. They want to wipe out the injustice. They got a lot of pent up issues and aggression and maybe some real beefs, right? And they're being swept along with the momentum of the time, right? But now they got to deal with this thing. They're probably scratching, wow, what's going on? So yesterday, the Supreme Court essentially said that the trans community is protected. They're protected, right? So now basically they've said that not only are minorities, quote unquote, minorities protected, they have now entered into their own special relationship with the federal government, which means that if they want to, they can basically broadcast a new set of rights, rules, regulations based on their specific acknowledgement by the Supreme Court. That happened both in the same day. Right? There was a big trans Black Lives Matter march in New York, and then there's the Supreme Court ruling. You think those things are by mistake? You think they're by accident? You think that they just happened sort of like synchronistically? No, these things are planned. We're watching stagecraft. We're watching a staged revolution right before our very eyes. It's staged. It's totally staged. And there are a lot of players in on it, and there are a lot of like dupes, extras. They're extras that are brought in. They're the NPCs. So pay attention, right? The real revolution was happening on the outset as we were like about 3/4 of the way into coronavirus. That's the real revolution that was happening when people started to go to like the capitals of Sacramento or the capital of Michigan or the capital of Maine. That was the real revolution. That was on. Okay. And what they did is they came in and they hijacked it. And they hijacked it with a blitzkrieg using the George Floyd event and others. And I already talked about a lot of stuff that they've preloaded. And I only touched on a few things. I talked about the Jordan Peele series on Netflix. There's a lot more. It's called programming for a reason. Okay. So I want to show you something, a couple things that are interesting here before I get out of here, because I got a client, early client. All right. So let me do another screen share here. Two things I want to show you before I jam. Let's do this. I'm loving this this StreamYard. I'm going to the StreamYard thing now. Totally going to the StreamYard thing. All right. Bonanza. Oh, bonanza. All right, here we go. So George Floyd, as we've mentioned before, seems to have a representation of the boule tattoo, same one as LeBron James has on his chest. Order of out of order chaos. You can even see, like on a deeper part of his chest, you can actually see this sword. Right? We're talking about simulacras. People that show up in different sorts of ways. This is really interesting because I believe that what we saw now, and I'm pretty convinced that what we saw with Derek Chauvin and everything else, that person who is being choked was not George Floyd. And here's a very good example of, and this is a company that actually produces very lifelike models, right? And these have to do with EMS services, training for EMS services. And when you look at this guy's like, oh man, would you trust that guy with your kids? I would not. Anyway, you're dealing with people, right? You're dealing with people who are connected. They're connected to networks, okay? And I did some really for me. I was like, I've been on this thing about, that. Let me stop the screen share. That guy on the bottom of the knee. You look at him. There's a weird thing going on with the ear. He's totally bald. He seems to be much darker in complexion than the theoretical George Floyd, and even the guy that and George Floyd's all dressed in black, by the way, right? Saturn, right? Saturn. You can see if that is him that he actually has some hair, but the guy on the ground has no hair. Let me just show you something really interesting here, right? So I was actually looking into this, and then I got a jam. I was looking into, and this is before I actually found that Imgur picture. Let me do a quick screen share here. I'm going to show you this. Here we go. So check this out. See this? That guy's not real. He is not real. That is for all intents and purposes, a dummy, right? The reason why the sunglasses aren't, because it's hard to like create the human eye. When I saw this, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Look how real that looks. Look how absolutely real that looks. Let me show you another one. Here we go. Same deal. That guy's not real. Now, if I told you that this was a real person, you might say, oh, yeah, okay. If I said this is so and so, you might say, oh, okay. That makes sense. This is not a real person. It's not a real person. And I'm just sharing this with you because where we are now, reality is really, really easy to manipulate, right? Really easy to manipulate. And there's this one scene with the Floyd event where they take him out, right? They take him out. And I think what they do is they take the double. And again, when you look at that event, right, you'll see them from the backside, like who is actually videotaping them you'll see them from the back. And all four of them are lined up behind so-called George Floyd. Now, why is that? Why are all four of them lined up behind him? All four of them are lined up behind him because they don't want to see that there may be something, the cheese might be stinking in Minneapolis, okay? So you have to look at that. Why is that happening? And just pay attention. Go back and look. Pay attention to the ears on the supposed George Floyd character. They don't even really look like ears. And then the proof in the pudding is that they flop George Floyd right onto the gurney and they flop him right into the EMS and they don't check any signs. None of the things that you're supposed to do, none of that happens. Okay, none of it. Doesn't work. And if he was 6'6" and weighed 235, 245, you try to lift somebody like that, it's going to take you 5 people. And these 2 scrawny ass cops flip him up there like he's Gumby. I mean, there's something, just pay attention, all right? This is staged. A lot of this is staged. It's staged. We're witnessing a staged revolution, and we know that there are groups, intelligence agencies that specialize in this stuff and have for a very long time. I'm going to show you one more thing before I'm out here. Kind of an interesting development. Really interesting development. And I'm not quite sure what to make of this, by the way, but I do think it's an interesting development. Let me find this here. All right. So Ice Cube has been very, very active on Twitter, let's just say. Now, we know Ice Cube was a member of NWA, and this is one of the groups that the music industry decided to push. And what's interesting is I knew, it's really funny, I knew the woman who did the books for NWA's label. She was a trip, man. She was a total trip. Like, so in my previous life in the music business, I used to work. My ex-wife and I used to work together, right? So she wasn't there, but there was a group of us in New York. We're doing business and stuff. We're having this dinner, and she knew I was married and everything, right? And next thing I know, I feel her foot up against my leg, like rolling up against my leg. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Anyway, she did the books for NWA. NWA, their record label, which I believe was Priority Records, if I'm not mistaken. It was run by a quote unquote Jewish guy, right? So there's a lot of Jewish power, a lot of Jewish money in the record industry, which promoted NWA. Let's be clear about that, okay? And Ice Cube knows that, right? But here he goes now. Now Ice Cube is getting into the black cube. 2 days after being criticized for tweeting a mural some have called anti-Semitic, the rapper Ice Cube was back at it on Wednesday, tweeting images associated with multiple conspiracy theories and facing open criticism from other celebrities. One image is of a Star of David with a cube in its center. A subsequent tweet shows black cube structures in different places around the world. The implication being that Jewish control spans the globe. The tweet was a hit with a warning. The tweet was hit with a warning from Twitter saying it might contain sensitive content. So he's got the black cube. I have posted this shit for years, right? These cubes are all over the place. You can find them. Mecca, right? The Kaaba is a black cube. The thing that they wear on their heads, right? Thing that you know, very very pious, very orthodox followers of the Jewish religion wear on their heads. Is it the tikkun? What is that thing? Anyway, black cube right on their foreheads, right? So Ice Cube. What if I was just pro-black? This is the truth, brother. I don't lie on anyone. I didn't say I was anti anybody. Don't believe the hype. I've been telling my truth. Sadly, no, this is the second anti Semitic post in a week. Conspiracy theories of Jewish global domination are textbook anti Semitism. So now we have the clash of anti Semitism and racism fighting it out in the open marketplace. I got to get my popcorn for that one. The message prompted another wave of criticism, including from prominent journalists Roxanne Gay and commentator Mark Lamont Hill, who has apologized for being wrapped up in an anti-Semitism controversy of his own. In response to Hill, keeps saying just being pro-black. Ice Cube has had a long, fraught relationship with Jews. The NWA founder supports Nation of Islam. Louis Farrakhan sees anti-Semitic Twitter history here. He has toyed anti-Semitic concepts and lyrics, blah, 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 blah. This explain why he is Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib's favorite rapper. So it's kind of interesting in the sense now that if that's true, right, that now what's happening is that there's a schism taking place, right? And you're beginning to see some of the anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish material coming up through a whole nother vector, right? It is not white nationalists now, right? It is not Nazis, which is kind of interesting. And Ice Cube with all that Saturnian stuff, the Black Saturn Cube, and we saw that when they blacked out everything on Facebook. That's exactly what they were doing. And people are wearing black now, which is the color of Saturn. When I showed you that picture of the new brown shirts or the new black shirts, it's the color of Saturn. Okay. So this thing with Ice Cube is going to be interesting to watch. I really don't trust him. I really don't trust anybody in public. And he's one of those guys that does the okey doke. And, he goes out and he plays like the Family Guy and all that stuff, right? When do we get there and all that? And then he'll flip his mask off and he'll be somebody else. And by the way, he was not like, even though he's connected with NWA, like he was going to a junior college. He had a very different kind of life than the other guys did. Like he and Eazy-E were very different characters. And Eazy-E was very street. He's no longer around. He was very street. He was really the most Compton out of all of them. Ice Cube was, he was studying to be a writer, and he's kind of an intellectual guy. And then they brought him in to write lyrics and stuff, and and he took on and put on the robes of sort of the urban guerrilla, burn it down, quote unquote black activist, even though really that's not really what NWA was up. They're more about chaos and anarchy. All right, let me see where you guys are at, because I got to get out of here. I'm actually late for a reading. Let's see what we got here. Just went a little bit over time. Trying to see some new comments. Come on, comments. I want to see some new comments. Let's see. I guess we're not seeing new comments. All right. So I'm going to assume that there are some really good comments. I can't really comment on them because I can't see the comments. Anyway. All right. So I'm just going to end today's show then on a positive note. All this stuff is now in our awareness. We're seeing the game in action, right? We're seeing the game in action. It's a game. It's very much a game. It's a game. It's a stage production, and they use events, collective events, and mass hypnotism and programming to get people who are not the main actors, and there are actors, by the way. And let's be clear, Ice Cube is an actor. He's been in a lot of movies. It's going to be interesting to see how Fox deals with him. He's been on all these sports shows with Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp, and it'll be interesting to see how they deal with the quote unquote Jewish thing now, right? And what's really interesting, before I go, I just have to say this. If you look at the sort of the model of Black Lives Matter and sort of the new social model that's being cast where you can't say anything against it, right? You can't say anything against it. Anything you say against it is inherently racist because racism is systemic, right? So you just can't say anything. You'll lose your job, whatever. What does this sound like? It sounds a lot like anti-Semitism, right? I mean, that used to be the major kind of piece. Like if you spoke out against so-called Jewish power or you looked at the links, right, between people like Larry Silverstein and all these other people, which are clearly there. And when I'm talking, I'm not indicting, everybody that's Jewish. Please hear me out on this, right? I never indict anybody specifically. I just don't. I know people of every religion and every culture and every so-called race and ethnicity. And I've had really good connections and really good relationships with any number of them. But I could go through each one of those groups, go to a high level, and I could show you at a high level that they all have something very similar in common. And that's money and control and power. And in many instances, they all work and collude together. Okay, so let's be clear about that. Okay, I want to be very, very on point with that. Very on point. So when I talk about something specific, right, I'm not indicting everybody. Please hear that. That's an important message. So what we saw, or we have seen, is like what Ice Cube is talking about. He's throwing it right out there. It was if you spoke out against like anti-Semitic, if you spoke out against, again, quote unquote, so-called Jewish power, Mel Gibson, whatever, you would wind up being toast. You'd lose your job, right? So what happened after the Holocaust? After the Holocaust, people got reparations. They got payments. Everybody who was theoretically in the Holocaust or their survivors have gotten money and still continue to get money from this very day. What are we talking about now? If you mention anything against Black Lives Matter, you're considered racist. Racism is the new anti-Semitism. Keep that in mind, okay? Racism is the new anti-Semitism. What is at the heart of the Black Lives Matter theoretical movement? Reparations. The same thing that we saw coming out of World War II. And because what's happened is that World War II narrative, right, began to fizzle out, began to quote unquote dissipate, right? I mean, still kind of there, but we're generations removed from that. And now we're seeing a whole new level of like quote unquote activists that don't care. I just pointed them out to you, and they don't really care about, theoretical Israel. They care more about Palestine. Which it's not like I don't care about Israel. There are good people who live in Israel. I know there are. There are good people and bad people live in a number of different places. We know that Palestine's gotten a pretty raw deal, right? They have. Gaza's gotten a raw deal. Let's just be clear about that. So they're using it as a human rights issue to support it, right? Boom, there you go. But now what we've done is we've flipped everything. So racism is the new anti-Semitism. That's key. We have a new level of reparations. That's key, right? So we've basically replaced one model of kind of untouchable and one area that you don't question, you don't communicate about, you don't share ideas, you don't share information. Because if you do and you diverge off the main narrative, you're automatically put into a box. So again, this goes back to World War II. This goes back to the rise of fascism and using certain people, right? Using certain people as quote unquote scapegoats. We're seeing it all over again. So what we're witnessing is literally mass hypnotism. Mass hypnotism, a simulacra of a revolution, a lot of pre-planning and a lot of groups that have been involved in this thing, sponsored by, Soros, probably alphabet agencies, got their fingers in all this stuff, right? This is what we're watching. This is what we're witnessing. This is how it's playing out. And a lot of it is stage and theater. Don't let it get to you. Just remember that. People are going to start to see the cracks in the illusion. It is going to happen. And these people, whoever they are, whether they're actors, whether they're paid provocateurs, right? They do not have truth on their side. They may think that they have the moral equivalent of truth, but they don't. What they have is momentum, okay? And momentum eventually runs out. Remember, that's the group that helps organize and direct a lot of these subgroups. And they're working off of momentum. If you know anything about momentum, anything about sports, eventually momentum runs out. So then they have to create another event to have another round of momentum. All right. Just remember that. All of what we're seeing here is based on illusion. And you have a number of people that are supporting the illusion. They're supporting the lie for a number of different reasons. I don't have time to get into them right now. All right. So stay close to the truth inside yourself. Don't ever let that go. Right. And don't ever sell out to it, the non-truth. And it's hard. It's really hard sometimes. It's really, really hard because when you go down that path, it can be a very lonely path. But do your best to stay close to it, right? And stay close to taking care of yourself and take care of your body and take care of your heart, right? Stay close to, living as close as you can to the spirit of Logos, which runs right through everybody's life, raises us up, doesn't break us down. It doesn't break us down into groups of the lowest common denominator. It raises us up to the highest vibration potential, right? That's the beautiful thing. We're settling again for a simulacra of some kind of convergence around, group consciousness, and that's just, it doesn't work that way, right? It does for a brief period of time. It's done it throughout history, but this is a different time. I'm telling you right now, it's a different time. We have an opportunity for a much different experience with group consciousness, one where you don't have to sacrifice your so-called individuality. But your so-called individuality is a point, an expression, and a channel, right, of Logos. And each and every one of us has that. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And we come together, right, as independent entities. We come together as independent entities for really much, much more powerful, quote unquote, social change, right? And it's a whole different set of lattices that bring us together. And by the way, everybody's invited. Everybody's invited. It's not exclusionary. It's not some kind of right thing or, right wing thing or no, it's open. It's really open. Everybody's invited. This is the true open society. The true open society. When you open your eyes and you open your heart and you open your mind, and you could, you put on those sunglasses, right? And you see what's going on. We're all joined together by a shared awareness. And nobody, no group and no individual is sacrificed and becomes the exclusionary point of focus, the fuel that drives the other. That doesn't cut it. That doesn't work, right? That is a limited hang. When that's over, they will go and burn the next group and the next model and the next model so that they can continue their momentum. The real stuff doesn't use that, doesn't depend on that at all. All right, I'm out of here. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to discern what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. Come shout at me on my website if you want to get a reading. I'm doing those. I got to go do one now. I'm actually late. I have to apologize to this person, but sometimes it's let's get wound up here. Anyway, go there. The new website's coming out. If you want to support the show, there'll be a link in the show page. Thank you all for participation. Chatlandia, everybody else, I love you. Stay strong. We're going to get through this, and we're actually really going to occupy a better world. Okay. We're really going to occupy a better world. So hold that vision, hold that thought, hold that peace in your heart. All right. Bye for now.